It's a beautiful Sunday morning here in Johannesburg. You're waking up to the biggest news review show here in the land. Media Monitor with me, Alicia Jali. Here's what we have for you this morning. We start by asking what will become of the state capture report that we now know that Speaker of Parliament MLIMANDLELA has taken back to the Public Protector's Office. We look at the EFF leader's recent summons on his land utterances, and we delve into the Pravin Gordhan fraudulent charges. Will the NPA review these charges? That's all what we're waiting to find out. And we wrap up the show with the question, is water now a crisis in our country? But first, as always, it's 900 hours and these are your top news. The role of developing countries in leading efforts to bolster global growth will come under sharp focus during the 8th BRICS summit, which gets underway at the Indian seaside resort of Goa. President Jacob Zuma will join leaders of China, India, Brazil and Russia for the meeting, which is held under the theme Building Responsive, Inclusive and Collective Solutions. Finance Minister Pravin Gordhan has asked the High Court in Pretoria for an order declaring that he has no obligation to interfere with the decision by the 4 major banks to close accounts associated with the Gupta family. Now, it's emerged that Gordhan filed court papers in the High Court in Pretoria on Friday. Some good news for sports fans as SUNDOWNS took a huge step towards winning the African Champions League for the continent's top football clubs. SUNDOWNS beat 5-time CAF Champions League winners Zamalek of Egypt 3-0 in the first leg of the final out in Pretoria last night. The second leg will be played in Alexandria in Egypt next Sunday. All right, let me welcome my panelists first this morning. Political analyst Professor Sipho Siepe, as well as media analyst Mr. SHAUN Makari. And for our legal matters, we got a legal expert, Mr. Michael MOTSOENENG. Gentlemen, a very good morning to all three of you. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning.
All right, and of course, a quick look at the big hashtags of the week. And for the segment, we're very pleased to be joined by SABC digital news producer, Ms. LEPHAKA. PABALLO, welcome back. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you very much,
Take
Alicia.
us through. I mean, I can only think of one thing that was trending throughout digital news this weekend. Of course, it was the Fees Must Fall protest.
Definitely.
Do take us through what happened on digital.
Fees Must Fall has been making its round on social media for the past couple of weeks now.
Yeah.
And we have seen scenes of violence that have been unfolding during the whole week. Now, on Friday, for example, in Braamfontein, there was violence that took place where an SABC van was torched. It was burned completely. And we also have a few pictures here. And then we have students who say that they weren't part of the protest, but this one guy in particular says that he got shot by a rubber bullet while he was just passing by.
Is that the wound?
That
Oh
is
my
the wound.
goodness, it looks
And then this is
terrible.
a picture also of one of the rubber bullets that were fired during the night. So it was quite chaotic.
What are they saying on social media?
Some people are saying that the VIT students themselves, they're saying that they can't be blamed for what happened because they weren't there. So as to whether who started the violence, that's debatable. So we have a few tweets from that closer chick who says, I really doubt students had anything to do with that Braamfontein incident. And then we had someone, HN_DSC saying, hold up Twitter, are you really blaming this on VITs? So these are the few tweets from students who are saying that they had nothing to do with it, they were not there when the violence broke out.
Now, this is very interesting, gentlemen. I want to find out from you. We've seen the violence escalate from campuses now to the streets. What do you make of this, particularly the incident where there was violence all around Braamfontein and even businesses were attacked on Friday? Let's start with you, Michael.
Well, I think it's a sad reality of our times, because there are political promises for free education, and this is the students saying, pay up, you've promised.
Professor?
Yeah, I think during our time, about 20 years ago, these are issues that we were raising. But what we had, we're told that it takes time. And the young people are saying, it's 20 years down the line. So you're not going to continue to give us that promise and that language, because you can't expect us 20 years from now. So the young people don't have the time. we were willing to listen to the Mandelas of the time to say, when they say it takes time, there was a politics of gradualism. But the young people are saying, yes, we understand this freedom, but it appears that the promises that are there have not shifted. We, as the majority of the people in this country, remain landless, we remain unemployed, the doors of learning are closed. So effectively, what it calls for is a really serious discussions around the challenges. What you see is a frustration that says, you don't even have an answer to us. So you can't continue to make promises. But what the violence comes more from the absence of a response that will guide the students. What we need now is more than anything hope to give to the young people to say it is possible we can build a different South Africa, and we have not done that.
SHAUN, do you think it's a case of, like the professor is saying, I mean, delayed promises, or it's just students being impatient? What do you think is the matter here?
Well, it's a combination of issues here. Obviously, politicians like making promises whenever we go to elections, and this is one form of holding them to account. Yeah. But just in terms of looking at what sort of solutions are possible, I think there's a key stakeholder here being ignored, and it's the parents. No one is speaking to the parents. You know, there are imbeciles being called. Why are these professors and the politicians not bringing the parents into the debate so that we can find a more inclusive solutions that includes the views of all the other important key stakeholders? Well, let's hope. We can only hope that the parents are actually getting in touch with the Fees Must Fall Commission, or the Feasibility Commission that is looking into the feasibility of whether or not free education is possible in this country. What else made it through to our digital space? I mean, I know a lot of people were tweeting. It became a funny thing also, as much as it is a serious thing. I mean, everybody was saying, I mean, what kind of cause are these two people studying at Wits? And I mean, you know how we are. We draw conclusions at the pictures we see. Look at Professor. PABALLO. Yeah,
so this picture was posted by our SABC reporter, Neo Mutloung, who was out on the streets. He actually also got shot by a rubber bullet. He was away from work from 2 days. So it made its rounds on social media. People were questioning how, but are these guys students? What's happening? Are they just using the protest as an excuse to be violent? Yeah. So, yeah, that's all right. Yeah.
Well, let's see what else made it onto our digital media front. I'm sure the Fees Must Fall protest is not going away. We probably will have more on next week. What else made it through, though?
And then we have the Chibok girls in Nigeria. 21 of them were released.
A great breakthrough.
And users on social media say that they are very relieved by the fact that these girls have been released now, because I mean, it's been quite a while, you know. And there are a few reactions here. MLIMANDLELA says, happy for the release of the 21. Cannot imagine the agony their families have gone through. It has been so long. And then we have Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma saying, I very warmly welcome the release of the 21 #Chibok girls. Let's all facilitate rehabilitation and healing and forge on to release the others.
It's a very big thing, this one. Michael, what did you make of these latest developments?
Well, it's absolutely good news. And I think it's the reality of our time, where we live with terror. So it's good news. It's obviously 2 years. One can only imagine what has been happening in the intervening period. But also one can only sympathize with the balance of the girls.
Professor, quick one.
Well, we must also question the capacity of the formations like AU. They talk about having security agencies, standby forces and all that. And you're talking about one country where these kids have been almost taken. What is it with all our technologies, with all our armies, intelligence and all, that we are not able to deal with this issue? So there is a serious weakness in some of the institutions that we've actually put. Actually, they are same institutions in name. So again, it's another promise that they hold, but the capacity does not exist.
You know, a new debate has come out of this, Shawnee. A lot of people are saying that there's an ongoing thing in Nigeria where people are wondering if the Nigerian government actually released the girls in favor of releasing some of the militants from Boko Haram. And I think that's going to be a debate that we are still likely to see in the next coming weeks.
No, absolutely. And I mean, one of the things that we shouldn't forget is that some of these girls' lives, well, I think nearly all of them, their lives have been completely shattered. Some of them are coming home as parents. Now, as you recall, there were reports that some of these girls now have babies. And where do they pick up? Where do they start? So it's a devastating situation. I mean, obviously the release is welcome.
I think that was a very great message there from the AU chair, or outgoing chair, should we call it. PABALLO, let's wrap up the segment by other news that made it big on the digital scene this week.
Okay, so a little earlier on during the week, some women stepped forward and made accusations against Donald Trump that he sexually assaulted them. So a lot of people on social media reacted to this, and then we had a hashtag called Why Women Don't Report. And these women were basically sharing their experiences and the difficulties that they had to encounter when having to report incidents of sexual abuse. What are some of the common ones? So here are some of the comments. This one lady says, Charlie, I sat in the room the next day with my mom and a police officer. Both of them said that I was going to ruin a boy's life. And then we also have Judy, who says, I tried telling my mom about family members and she always dismissed it. And then we have users of social media who say that people in power abuse their positions. So you go and you report a case, but then it gets lost somehow down the line because it's an influential person.
Look, we've got a legal expert here. Michael, why do women feel that they cannot report rape charges?
I think, Alicia, sexual assault or sexual violence is a very personal crime against.
But it's a crime still.
But it's very personal. So the personal nature of it is the person is already feeling violated, and correctly so. Now, to endure further victimization and violation is a deterrent. It would cause somebody to be reluctant to report it or be uncomfortable. And I think it talks to a broader debate about whether our police and are sufficiently equipped to deal with these things. I know that there are attempts to have sexual offences courts and like interventions, but whether they are enough to encourage the reporting of sexual violence is a step that we yet to achieve.
A very quick one before we go. Okay. What else was trending on digital media this week?
It was the release of the iPhone 7.
Oh yes, I'm sure a lot of people were happy about that.
Some people complaining that it's too expensive. A lot of memes, people saying that they'll only own it in 2022. You have to save a lot of money before you get it. Some people praising it. And then we have...
in the times of data must fall.
Yes, definitely. And then we have some people, like I said, who are saying, I don't see much of a difference between my iPhone 6 and the new iPhone 7, so I'll pass. So these are the different views that are coming out from the iPhone.
SHAUN, what did you think? Are you getting a new one?
Well, not really. Our phones are the same to me. They do. I do 3 things on my phone. I send SMSs, WhatsApp messages, and make phone calls.
And receive calls.
Exactly.
SHAUN, Michael, do you want to quickly pitch in there before we wrap up this segment?
I think just my 2 cents worth is just, it's always shocking at how much more expensive these things are.
It is, though.
The iPhone 6 was about 14,000 rands. So I can only imagine what the iPhone 7 is.
And Professor,
that's
are you going to fork out?
I'm with Shawnee. I'm easy on these things. I belong to the old school of pencil and paper.
I think we'll bring back 2110. Should have hashtag.
It's 10. Well, that's where we leave it, PABALLO. Thank you so much. That is PABALLO. Please, before you go, please tell them, give them the URL where they can get all the digital news that you're putting on our content.
Okay, so it's www.sabcnews.co.za. All right. That's where you can get all the news from.
There you have it. She'll be back next week with more trends on the digital front. Let's take a quick ad break, and after that, Thuli Madonsela state capture saga comes up after this. Do stay tuned.
Keeping you up to date with business developments.
There's no shortage of money in the system. There's a shortage of implementation capacity to actually get things done.
Always on point with news of the day.
May has promised radical social and economic reforms, fueling speculation over the future of current senior figures.
On the ball every time with all sports codes.
The Joburg side already have a quarter-final at home, and a victory against the Argentines will ensure home semi-final.
accurate weather updates after every bulletin. Stay tuned to News Today at 3 p.m. from Monday to Friday on SABC News.
Welcome back. Now, Speaker of the National Assembly, Baleka Mbete, has returned the state capture report back to the Public Protector's Office. The report was sent to Mbete for safekeeping until the urgent applications brought by President Jacob Zuma, as well as Cooperative Governance Minister Des van Rooyen, are heard in court. All right, it doesn't look like we have a clip on that one, gentlemen. I was hoping we we're going to get more on that clip. But let's look at this issue. I mean, what did you make of the latest applications to actually keep the report a little bit of a secret for a while longer, Shawnee?
Well, in the beginning, I was skeptical that the public protector will actually find anything new. I remember I expressed this view on this show. And now I think she might have actually uncovered even more information. Hence, people are going all out to try and keep it from the public.
Professor, what did you think before we get the legal terms here?
Yeah, well, I think there's a provision in the Act that says, in the course of investigation, if there are people who are going to be implicated, it is expected, and I think what other people call the lawyers, the laws of natural justice, that you want to hear the other side before you come to a conclusion. Here, what was very clear is that the people who had called to testify, these are not just ordinary people. These are people who had felt that they'd actually experienced some form of influence or pressure. So effectively, what Thuli Madonsela had was mostly the submission by those people. And she also makes an argument that the president was given questions much earlier. But even that, it can still be questioned. You could respond to the questions, but the law still allows those who are implicated to raise questions, to receive documents, yes, and also to question. What we know, at least which is not denied even by her, is that these people have not made that submission. That's why they went to court. Yes. So it is reasonable, even if it was not favorable, that the interest of fairness and justice also requires that these things should not be hurried. We understand that you can condemn people for, at least you should have subpoenaed them to say you'll appear on this day because you have this responsibility. But I'd worry if some people can come to a conclusion about me when I have not received the documents, when I have not had an opportunity to question, especially when the law allows. But even if the law did not allow, it simply seems reasonable to say, if my child says, other child has done this, I'll ask the child, have you actually done it? And then on the basis that I come to it. So this is what you find as simple, commonsensical thing. But the argument that some people use, that you have a president who has a history of delaying and all that, that may be true, but still does not mean he should not be heard. So I do think that sometimes we must err on the side of caution. But what Shawnee is saying, given also the submission that was made by Pravin Gordhan and what has emerged, is that there is probably much more than the allegations that would have been repeated. That there's something new in that. But I do think that we should actually suspend our sense of agency to say, let it be tempered by the sense of justice and fairness.
You know, Michael, it's very interesting because, I know some of the media personnel actually posed this question to the public protector when she was giving a final briefing. She told them that the reason that the report is not going to be released is basically because it is good practice to let the other parties raise their issue in court and do the ethical thing. But a lot of people are saying, like Shawnee was saying now, I mean, he's saying that, you know, there might have been evidence that has come out and people don't want it to come to light. Yeah. And this is the type of thing that actually confuses society, though. Shouldn't we wait for the law to take its course and allow the proper processes to be followed in order for us to get a proper report at the end of the day?
I think you're spot on that proposition, because I think there's an overemphasis of what the public is saying. Yeah. And often as lawyers we say that when we are in the pursuit of justice, we don't succumb to public pressure.
Yeah.
And that's part of the responsibility of holding an office such as that of the public protector.
No fear, no favor.
Absolutely. So when you succumb to pressure, and my sense was, what's the rush? I simply asked that question.
Yeah.
Because there appears to me to be an overemphasis of personality as opposed to the office of the public protector. It is to me irrelevant whether Thuli Madonsela is going to vacate the office or not. An investigation does not belong to the persona. It belongs to the office. And we didn't establish Thuli Madonsela. We established in our constitution the public protector. So that is my concern about the entire commotion. I simply failed to understand the entire commotion around this report and the urgency around the report. But to answer your question, I think that the simple fact of the matter is we don't succumb to public opinion. And the Prof has talked about the issue of, or the legal principle of hearing the other side, which we call the audi alterum partem rule, which says, hear the other side, because that is what justice is premised upon.
Yeah.
If I am to be found wanting in my conduct or whatsoever, I should at the very least have been afforded the opportunity to present my side. But the other important thing to that principle is not just to hear the other side, but it's actually for me to interrogate the other side. So
Yes.
it's what is built into that is not just let me say my version, but let me also interrogate your version, because if you are to make an adverse finding about me, I should at least be afforded that basic principle.
Michael, please clarify this for us then, while we're on that subject. I mean, the public protector alluded to the fact that according to the Act, she can give the provisional report to the Speaker of Parliament for safekeeping. But now the Speaker of Parliament turns around and says, no, I don't want to keep this report. Just now they'll be saying that, I've done some things through the report. Do you take us through that? Where's the law in that?
Well, that's also confusing, because I don't understand why there isn't a handover from the
a proper handover,
the new public protector and the old. I don't see why that should be removed, and probably that's some of why the commotion is informed possibly by that. Because why is it such a big deal? It's remember that even the public protector herself, Thuli Madonsela, the persona, she doesn't do every single thing. She has people in her office that are doing these things. So it's almost as if the office of the public protector is constituted by one individual, which is not the case.
And actually, that's where the danger is, because what we do then, we make the person an institution rather than respect the office. And what we do is that we expect the next public protector to behave like that one, when in effect they need to actually apply their minds and come to a conclusion, and also make sure that you see what you have. You also had the public protector who was almost amenable to the media. And the Law Society of South Africa has actually come up with a position when they held a discussion on the issue of the remedial action. What they said is that they wish that the next public protector will behave more like a judge, where you let your reports speak for themselves, rather than to get into public spect. Because once you get into having to explain yourself all the time, what you do, you get into a political space, and then you become a political player, and that becomes a very, very dangerous.
Gentlemen, we have to leave it there, unfortunately. I know, Michael, you wanted to say something, but a lot of people have been saying that whether she likes it or not, Advocate Mkhwebane is going to be gauged for her credibility according to how she handles now this report that is now fallen on her lap. After the break, we're going to tackle the apartheid law used against Julius Malema. Will those summons stick? Well, find out after the break. Stay with us.
Information-hungry viewers stay with SABC News, as issues on the West are different from issues on the East or here in Johannesburg. So it is not surprising that people who follow the news know that there are two things for sure: that anything can happen, and SABC News will tell you when it does. Because we keep the nation fully informed. We are SABC News.
Economic freedom fighters leader Julius MALEMA was summoned to appear before court for calling on people back in 2014 and June 2016 to occupy vacant land around the country. Now, according to two summons served on him, MALEMA contravened the Righteous Assemblies Act 17 of 1956, read with Section 2 of the Trespassing Act of 1959. But here's more on this clip.
Even said that when you say the land must be shared amongst those who work it, it means if whites can work on this land, they too can claim it. But the reality is that this land belongs to the African majority in South Africa. These whites found us here and none of them came with a bag full of land. That's why they can't claim to be owning the land here in South Africa.
Michael, you're back on the spot here because a lot of people are saying, I mean, MALEMA is now charged under the contravention of Section 18B of the Righteous Assemblies Act, Act 17 of 1956, read with Section 2(1) of Trespassing Act 8 of 1959. Now, you know this, you're going to explain to the public, but I understand it that we're not even in governance at that time. So a lot of people are saying, how does post-apartheid law apply to our society now?
Yeah, it applies 100%. Remember that when we took over government as a democratic government, we didn't scrap what had happened. We didn't scrap anything. We added to and are in the process still to this day of removing those acts or those sections of the act which are inconsistent with the Constitution, which embodies the spirit of democracy, fairness and equity. So it is very unfair. It makes for a nice soundbite to say it, but it's also quite unfair to say that MALEMA has been charged with pre-apartheid legislation because pre-apartheid legislation is what informs our legal system. There was no overhaul of the legal system. We did inherit it, and that's another debate on its own, where people are saying, well, our law is such that it is not African enough. We're talking about Roman Dutch law, we're talking about common law, which in part is true, but we have developed our law to a large extent and made it South African.
Gentlemen, Professor, what did you make of this? I mean, a lot of people are also saying, why the charges now and not 2 years ago when he made those utterances?
Well, I think he made those utterances, and it depends on who is going to open the case and when. What we have here is AfriForum that went into our statute books and said, well, there is this that we can use, and they used it. But what we must also understand is that we are in the process of creating new laws. Because every law that has not been repealed, I mean, what we did was to repeal the ones that were obvious. But the ones that are not so obvious, we didn't deal with those. But those will be subjected to whether they are constitutional or not. So you are going to find that there will be laws that are there that are going to be continuously pushed because they are not going to be consistent with the Constitution. And what also MALEMA is also saying is we have a right to protest. And sometimes protest becomes disruptive, or actually it tends to be disruptive all the time. And he's simply saying, you guys promised us that within a certain period, the land will have been given back to the people. And it has not happened. So we're going to, so it almost must be seen as a pressure and as a way of saying we're protesting the slowness with which you are actually taking this matter seriously.
All right, Shani.
Well, you know, we've had several instances in this country where people say that some charges brought against certain politicians are politically motivated. To me, it's irrelevant. The question is the case legally valid? If it is, then you have a case to answer to, and that's the end of the story.
Michael,
and
is there a case?
That's exactly what the High Court said about the spy tapes. They say the motive is of no relevance. What's important is whether the person has a case to answer to, whether it was inspired by some ulterior purpose, whether I charge you because I hate you. It doesn't matter if you've committed an offense.
And in this case, is there a case then, Michael?
Well, it's very difficult for me to say because, you know, I haven't fully considered both points of view. But what I can say,
the charges that have been brought
prima
against him,
facie, it does appear that there is some debate. Because to incite people to take over property unlawfully would, to me, seem to be an offence. But Why I say there is some debate to it is because if you look at the Fees Must Fall protest, there is a similar propositions that are put to say, take what is not yours in law. So that's the interesting debate that I think Council would have a good time arguing on both sides.
All right. Well, that's where we're going to leave it on that matter. We're going to take a quick ad break. And after that, will Pravin Gordhan stay as Finance Minister? It's coming up after this break.
A conscious move from being a street kid to being a barrister of note.
Keep on praying for me to make a better life.
A creative application of the mind on an essential need, water in wheelbarrow containers.
How about if we were to come up with an idea of an enclosed container that sits on top of the frame of a wheelbarrow?
With the sharing of resources, a boy with Russell Silver syndrome receives medication.
The fact that you just said to me, well, you covered for next month, that's amazing.
So that's the medication.
For more inspiring stories, stay tuned to Bupilong every Friday.
We're back with Media Monitor now. The NPA announced on Tuesday that Finance Minister Pravin Gordhan, former SARS Commissioner Obama Khashula, as well as former Deputy Commissioner of SARS, Mr. Ivan Pillay, will be charged with fraud. The charges relate to Pillay's early retirement from SARS and of entering into a new employment contract with Pillay for a period of about 4 years. The news have negatively impacted the economy and have the potential to jeopardize the upcoming rating review by rating agencies before the end of this year. But here's more on this insert.
While the country tries to make sense of developments around the finance minister being charged, international investors will wonder about whether or not National Treasury is still in charge of government finances. Economist at Econometrics Dr. Azar Jamin says it's these fears that are affecting the rand and will likely impact the rating agency's decision in December when they review the country's credit rating. But should the rand continue to plummet, it is the consumer who will be left poorer. A weak rand pushes up inflation, and that in turn pushes up people's disposable income. But their income doesn't immediately increase in line with inflation.
Under those circumstances, the damage is not going to be huge. But if Pravin Gordhan is removed from office and the perception of state capture gains a lot of ground, then the rand could plummet back to 16, even 18, even 20 rand to the dollar. People would panic, and that would cause a major increase in inflation and in interest rates.
The short-term saving grace is that it's not known whether the charges against the minister will be proven or not. That's probably why the rand is extending losses against major currencies at a much slower pace than it did 9 months ago when former Finance Minister Nhlanhla Nene was sacked. Diabosito, SABC News, Johannesburg.
Wow, Michael, are these charges going to stick?
I can never know that. But whether prima facie they appear serious, yes, they certainly do. And I've heard a lot of criticism to say, but this is so minor. I don't think it is minor. I think that if you the amount involved is in the region of R1 million, and despite the persona, despite the fact that it's the minister.
Explain what these charges are.
Well, they relate to, so what happens is that government employees are regulated by, they have their own government pension scheme under the GEPF.
Yeah.
And what that act provides is that certain benefits that are given to government employees when they exit or when they reach retirement. So it would appear that in this case, this individual, the former deputy commissioner, was given a benefit in terms of that pension scheme that he was not entitled to. And he received that benefit through the manipulation of the act. In other words, it didn't apply to him, and he received the benefit. And as a result, the GEPF lost something in the region of R1 million.
My goodness, but do you think people understood these charges?
Well, I think they did, and what you often hear for those who enter the space, they say, but Pravin is a good man. And that is where they start. And two, that he represents the best of South Africa. And therefore, if these charges are there, but let's look at them, they're not so serious. So if he's a good man and he's good for the country, we can try to make a case that we don't deal with him. So that is a problem.
Ethical courts.
And unfortunately, even the so-called rating agencies have also become players in this. Yeah. That we have our man in him. And if you do something about him or to him, we will deal with you. So we seem to be judged not so much about the policies that we put, but about the personalities that are there. Mm-hmm. And this is where I think we need to start stepping back to say, these are the policies of this government, regardless of who is actually supposed to drive them. But the ANC itself has become so fictionalized that now you see groupings taking positions. But the issue that should be answered in a court of law is there a case to answer? And if there's a case to answer, and he appears to be saying, I was given legal advice, and the legal advice, and even the groupings that are representing him, like the Helen Suzman Foundation, the Freedom Under Law, are simply saying, first they start, someone start saying these are minor charges, but also they're saying, don't even ask for a review by the NDPP, simply go to court and then the court decide whether you're actually right. But my concern is where individuals begin to represent an institution no longer themselves as drivers of that institution.
Yeah, you know, Shaun Abrahams was very, very livid to the members of the media. They're saying that it is time, the time of disrespecting the institution, the NPA, must come to an end because they make decisions based on what they have as an organization. Shaun?
Yes, allow me to just divert a little bit.
Yeah.
Case or no case for Pravin, the bottom line is that international investors and local investors actually don't like political instability. So this might be seen as a debate in a maturing democracy, but the bottom line is that if you're holding your last $10 million, where do you take it? You're not going to take it to a place where you don't know what's going to happen to the markets the following morning. And quite frankly, that's what investors will be thinking and will be doing. They'll be holding back onto their money and basically do a wait-and-see approach. And that will hurt the economy and it will help the average person on the street. And to me, we need to be concerned about that with all that's going on as well.
Let's talk about that, the impact of these charges against the finance minister.
Actually, we must ask ourselves what we mean by political instability.
Yes.
The movement of one person from a position should not, in a democracy, constitute a political instability. This happens all the time, especially when the law and the constitution says people serve at the pleasure of somebody.
Yes.
If you are in a position and the person has been given that by our laws, that person must and will bring about the team that works best for them. But what is unfortunate about this is that we have not allowed the principles to be the ones that we put first. What we have done, we have contaminated the entire debate by individuals and the histories of individuals. And instead of saying what is really at issue here. So if we can become policy-oriented and principle-oriented, we might actually move away from the clutter. But it is the job that we have done, and we are sending that message to people outside.
I agree with the professor.
Very quickly, Shaun, we're out of time on this one.
Perception is key. And on the surface, things might actually look, I mean, what is truly happening might actually have nothing to do with political instability, but what the person sitting somewhere 3,000 miles away doesn't actually get to interrogate the information. So all they see is what is being reported in the media. And the message that comes across is that this place is not necessarily stable.
Michael, you're going to have a say in this next story where the Supreme Court of Appeal has decided they want President Zuma's lawyers to rather argue in open court for the right to appeal the spy tapes ruling. Now, this is after the ConCourt's refusal to hear the NPA's leave to appeal. And earlier this year, you might remember that the North Gauteng High Court ruled the decision to have the charges of fraud and corruption was indeed irrational and set it aside. But let's take a look at this clip.
we will consider our approach in respect of the matter and make a decision in due course on the way forward. We have not had the opportunity as a leadership to make a final decision around the matter, specifically around the latest developments as well.
If the court finds that there are no merits to give leave to appeal, that will be the end of the matter. If it finds that there are in fact grounds for an appeal, then the court will immediately hear the appeal simultaneously. This will then speed up the process so that one can then get finality from the Supreme Court of Appeal in one action.
Michael, what rights or recourse does the president have as a citizen when it comes to this matter?
Well, he's put up a good fight. It's lasted. It's lasted longer than most of us care to remember. So the recourse that he has available is, of course, this one, and it would appear to me that it is probably his last if this one doesn't work out. But they bring up a very important question, which is to say, is it the decision of the courts to decide who should and who should not be charged? That's a very important question, which brings about a very involved debate, and it is for that reason that the Supreme Court of Appeal has, in addition to just being furnished with documents for leave to appeal, has actually requested oral submissions, which is not something that happens regularly, but certainly does happen, and they are certainly empowered to do so by the Supreme Court Act. So what's interesting about it is, on the one hand, the prosecution is subject to public accountability.
Yes.
So they're not prosecuting for themselves, they're prosecuting on our behalf. And the institutions that hold them accountable are judiciaries. Yet there is an interesting debate that I conceived from reading various things to say, well, if we then say that they are subject to public scrutiny through the judiciary, if you then take one step back and say, but when the prosecutors take a case forward and they take it to court, it's the courts that make a finding of guilt or otherwise. So the interesting debate lies here. There appears to be an opportunity for the courts to have two bites at the cherry in terms of decision making, and that requires some kind of development to say who monitors. So the judiciary is seemingly having too much power, because even if the matter does come before you, you are the one that's going to say, well, this matter shouldn't have come, and I'm dismissing this application by the prosecution, or to find the individual concerned guilty. In fact, even when you look at the various orders that have culminated into Advocate Jiba's removal as an advocate, the NPA was criticized. And related one of the cases to the spy tapes case. So I think that it's quite interesting. And it's going to be quite useful for us as jurists to say, where do we draw the line? Because my personal observation is that South Africa is governed through courts.
A lot of people actually made a lot of reference to, I saw the press briefing there, they were making a lot of reference to, when it comes to this case in particular, to the Pravin matter, saying that, shouldn't he go through the same stages as the president is going through? This is not about an individual, it's about a case being brought against an individual. Professor?
Yeah, I think the last comment by Michael is very important. The idea that is almost coming very strongly, that the courts are governing. And if that is what is emerging, then there's something wrong with this democracy. Because they are not supposed to be, they are not elected. And what has not happened here is that we seem to shy away from the possibility where the executive and the judiciary are going to have a serious engagement. And this is emerging, but for some reason, we seem to be more on the side that the courts are always right and the executive is always wrong. And that is actually a problem. And the other matter that is being raised here, this is why the NPA is also trying to appeal, is that are the courts now going to be telling us that who to prosecute and when to prosecute? Because that is not within their space. What they need to do is to make a determination, as they made, that certain decisions that have been taken are irrational or not, or cannot be supported or unconstitutional. That we can understand. But when it comes to the issue of where is the authority given to decide. And we must also understand, as Michael put it, this has been a long-standing running case, which had been at least thrown out of the court 3 times as well.
Yeah.
And people tend to forget that the mere fact that you're going to have this does not mean it's going to be smooth sailing.
Yeah.
Even after this, these guys will still have an opportunity to go to the Constitutional Court. Remember, the Supreme Court of Appeal has also sometimes been found to be wanting. So people must understand that the law is not an exact science. We continue to create, to try to make sense and try to get the best possible solution for our challenges.
Michael, please wrap this for us. I mean, sorry, Shaun, I know I really want to get the legal comment here. I mean, a lot of people are confused by the separation of powers, and the professor brings it up to say, we're not sure then who makes which decision as a country.
And I think I want to just qualify my point and maybe just be clear and say what this case brings about. I'm certainly not making an argument to say that I'm agreeing with one party or the other, but it certainly does avail to us an interesting debate to say who is supposed to hold a prosecution accountable. And that's the one layer. But who's to hold the courts accountable? Which is another debate, which I think that if I was arguing on behalf of Mr. Zuma, I'd certainly raise. But certainly the jurisprudence thus far seems to be clear in that all exercise of power, of public power, is subject to public and judicial scrutiny.
Wow, a very quick one, Shaun. We're going to go to break just now.
I was just going to say that somebody has to be the final arbiter of all the
That's
events that are going to happen. And we've given that power to the courts. And we're going to have to live with that.
All right, well, that's where we're going to leave it on this discussion. We're going to have more Media Monitor shortly after this break. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to our final segment. Now, water shortages have hit the all-time low for South Africa as the Vaal Dam water levels continue to depreciate. Now, this comes after the El Niño weather pattern brought drought conditions to much of southern Africa. And we are very pleased to welcome Mr. MLIMANDLELA NDAMASE. He is the spokesperson for the Department of Water and Sanitation. Sir, good morning. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good morning, and thank you very much.
MLIMANDLELA, a lot of people want to know, are we having a water national crisis in South Africa?
Well, the reality is that we are faced with a very severe drought. This is one of the worst droughts in over 100 years that we've seen as a country. So that alone should tell you that it is quite a difficult period in as far as we are concerned in the water sector. But another reality that we must express is that South Africa is a water scarce country. So if you look at the countries of the world and the average rainfall that they receive, we are actually viewed as the 30th driest country in the world, or amongst the top 30 dry countries in the world. So on its own, it shows that we have over time been in a challenge with regards to water resources. However, we have been able to manage our water resources quite well, but at the same time, the challenges that we've confronted over the last 3 years of the drought have now called upon us to start re-looking how we're using water as a country and to really start taking on board new innovations and to start changing the patterns of how our people are using water and how they relate to water as a precious and a scarce resource.
Give us more details about that. I mean, how are you then highlighting the severity of water shortages around the country?
Well, I think if you talk to people who are in some of the provinces that have been devastated by drought, they have really felt the effects of the drought over the last couple of months. If you talk to people in KwaZulu-Natal, in the Northwest, in the Free State, you would really get to see the challenges that our people have confronted in as far as not having access to water is concerned. But obviously what brings it to the fore now is that this economic hub of ours called Gauteng has since been under severe threat in terms of water supply. Now, one of the reasons that has become is that the Vaal Dam and its system is currently sitting at just above 50% in as far as our water supply is concerned. Now, the Vaal system on its own has over 14 dams that we monitor and that assist us to supply water to this economic hub that's Gauteng. So the government and the municipalities have actually been implementing restrictions, and we have actually made a call to South Africans to say that it is urgent and there's a need for us to reduce our water consumption by 15%. I know many people think it's a difficult thing to do, but if you look at a province like KwaZulu-Natal, we've had restrictions there over a year now, and those restrictions have actually been complied with. So people can actually respond and can adapt to the realities of climate change and water shortages. But it's just a question of me and you taking the active decision to say, you know what am I or what can I do differently so that I can save a little bit more water?
We have to schedule our showers. I mean, this is the problem. I mean, I know of a province, I think if I stand to be corrected here, I think in the Free State, they had 1 week supply of water left. I mean, it is a shocking thing. So what are you as a department then doing in terms of let's say you've just spoken about the fact that your Vaal Dam is at 50% water capacity. What are you now doing in terms of building the infrastructure to preserve water?
Look, over the last 20 years, government has made a huge investment in as far as infrastructure is concerned, and especially the development of new infrastructure. But one of the things we must appreciate is that when this government came into power in 1994, a very insignificant portion of our population had access to clean water. So we've had to then go in and actually start supplying areas that have not had water over periods of time so that they can have access. So a lot of work has gone into that. But however, one of the challenges we've had is the actual maintenance of our infrastructure. And unfortunately, in terms of our constitutional and legal setup, that responsibility rests with municipalities. Now, with some of the challenges we've had in our municipalities, more especially around capacity to manage and to operate some of our infrastructure, there have been gaps in as far as the maintenance of infrastructure is concerned. And those are some of the things that the minister has spoken to very passionately about the need to actually intervene, the need to support municipalities so that we can actually get the infrastructure working. Because if the infrastructure is not working, we may speak of reducing our water use levels. But if the infrastructure is actually, is weak and allowing itself to leaks and all those type of problems, then it means we are really playing an end-sum game. So it's very important that whilst we maintain and operate the infrastructure efficiently, we develop new infrastructure, but again, most importantly, it's about South Africans changing their water use patterns.
You know, MLIMANDLELA, I want to hear from the panel. Gentlemen, what do you think about this? Do you think that South Africans are going to comply? I mean, it sounds like we're at a severe stage now where we really, really need to think about these water restrictions.
I doubt very much that, especially when it comes to the issue of, for instance, washing your cars and other such things. But the important thing for me is that, it's amazing how government goes about prioritizing. We live in a planet that is more than 70% covered with water. And you have countries like Australia and Israel prioritizing projects like desalination. And where are we on that? The Australian have a plan that generates electricity and desalinates water at the same time. What are we doing about projects like that? It's like the electricity challenge. We saw that one coming. It was coming, for months before or years before, and yet, only at the last minute did we then jump up and started to do something about it. That's discouraging.
Thank you so much. That's where we're going to leave it. But MLIMA, where can people get details in terms of, the water restrictions, how they're going to affect them, and get clued up about the current water situation in the country?
Well, I think some of our entities have actually done a lot of work in terms of communicating with the public. If you look at entities such as Johannesburg Water and their websites, including the National Department of Water, there's a lot of information on there in terms of how we are monitoring the restrictions and their implementations on a weekly basis. So South Africans really, as we have said, it has happened before. In an area like KwaZulu-Natal, people have managed to comply with the restrictions. But now the challenge is really on us, especially in this economic hub that is Gauteng, so that we can really start bringing down our water use patterns. And just a last point,
prioritizing
how we use our water, but importantly, you must remember, as I've said, we are not working on unlimited resources. So issues such as desalination, whilst government has actually done a lot of work to actually bring those to the fore, they do not happen overnight, and they are very costly, where they require energy efficiency and supply, and therefore we need to take all of these things into consideration.
MLIMANDLELA, NDAMASE, the spokesperson for the Department of Water and Sanitation, joining us here to talk about our water crisis here in the country. And of course, my gentlemen, thank you so much. SHAUN Makari, Professor Siposieva, and of course our legal expert there. We had to have him, Mr. Michael MOTSOENENG, on those legal issues. Unfortunately, that's where we're going to have to wrap it up for today. But thank you so much for tuning in. We are back next week, same time and place, right here on the SABC News Channel. I'm back on top of the hour with AIM News. I'm Alicia Jali. Stay with us.
A conscious move from being a street kid to being a barrister of note.
Keep on praying for me to make a better life.
A creative application of the mind on an essential need, water in wheelbarrow containers.
How about if we were to come up with an idea of an enclosed container that sits on top of the frame of a wheelbarrow?
With the sharing of resources, a boy with Russell Silver syndrome receives medication.
The fact that you just said to me, well, you covered for next month, that's amazing.
So that's the medication.
For more inspiring stories, stay tuned to Bupilong every Friday.